Before I get into any details, I have an important announcement to make, which is just a couple minutes ago, ABC and NBC called the state of New Hampshire for Senator Bernie. In the spirit of not me, us, which is the central spirit of this campaign, I want to ask some questions about who came here tonight. I want to know about who is here tonight. So I'm going to ask some questions. Who here in this room is involved in one of the caring professions? Who here, thank you. Who here, and we'll get into detail there. Who here in this room has seen from where they sit as an activist, as a provider of healthcare, our broken healthcare system and knows we can do better? I want to get honed down on some individuals here. So let's start with who here is a nurse? Any nurses? I started with nurses because in the entire time that I have been involved in certainly the fight for Medicare for all, I've mostly seen nurses leading the way. So, thank you. Who here is involved in pharmacy or as a pharmacy student? All right. And when Bernie Sanders is elected, we're going to restore your profession to you. It is what the commercial, kind of all that stuff has done to the work that you want to do. It offends me every day. Who here is a physician? Outstanding. Thank you for coming here. You, tonight and in the work we're all going to be doing forward, you are going to give the lie to the notion that physicians aren't supporting Bernie Sanders. Thank you. Who here is an activist who isn't a healthcare provider, but who has been killing themselves or doing the work in getting out the word on Medicare for all and healthcare? I want to recognize. So, one thing, and I in some of the invitations, I made this clear, and I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for Senator Sanders, as there should be. But I also intended for this event to be a movement-building event, right? And that means that if people are here who are still thinking about who they're voting for, still getting their heads around this primary, thank you for coming. And we respect the fact that you're doing your due diligence, and we want to answer questions for you. So you are welcome here too. I don't know. We won't make anybody raise their hand. Okay, that's okay. That's great. Thank you for that. So let me just give you a sense of a couple more specific folks, and I will end up introducing the speakers one at a time as they come out. But I want to recognize a couple special people. So three who are sort of very directly working with the campaign. So we'll hear about him again later. But Michael Leidy, who is the director of healthcare, the constituencies for the campaign. So Michael Leidy. Sand Brim, who is a health policy advisor to Senator Sanders, and is also sort of the liaison with Doctors for Bernie. Yeah. Myra, your last name, who is really leading the way on organizing doctors for Bernie in California, certainly in Southern California. So Myra. And the last thing before we kind of roll into program, we're going to start with seeing a short video and then hear from our speakers. So I want to see people in this room who are involved in a labor union, who are part of or involved in organizing, or have been part of. And so I have a feeling that includes, so people paying for the campaign, but are there people from the Council of Interns and Residents, from outstanding, SEIU, yeah,
NUHW, National Union of Healthcare Workers.
California Nurses Association, NNU, National Nurses. So let's. I'm gonna turn on this video, and then we're gonna hear from our speakers, and then we're gonna talk a little bit of organizing after we answer questions. So we won't do questions one at a time for the speakers, but one thing we're going to do is pass out, and somebody could help me with that from the back. Oh, actually, let me recognize one more person back there. So physician's assistant student April, May, August. Who's been also helped with checking people in, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for your organizing work. Since you're back there also, would you mind passing out those little cards so that if you think of questions as you go tonight, write them down and we'll answer questions. So let's fire up this video.
I spend a lot of my time arguing on the phone with insurance companies.
30% of my day was spent arguing with insurance companies.
I spend almost as much time talking with health insurance companies as I do talking with my patients.
The private health insurance industry is the original sin behind America's unaffordable healthcare system.
Who could possibly benefit from such an inhumane system?
We will no longer accept the unacceptable. That is why we support Medicare for All.
Like many other physicians, I've seen the waste of our healthcare system, the enormous amount of time spent on billing and coding, and time that physicians and other healthcare providers should be spending on taking care of patients, not checking boxes or fighting with insurance companies.
I had a patient, 21-year-old gentleman, who could not provide medication for himself, for his diabetes. We would give him medication, but he could not afford the medication himself. Until one day, unfortunately, he passed away. From that day on, I realized that I had to do more than be just a doctor. I want to worry about the patient, not the paperwork.
So much of my day is wasted simply on bureaucratic paperwork, and all of that goes to the coffers of the private health insurance companies that make a lot of money denying healthcare to people.
The reality is that private health insurance is far more wasteful than public plans. The administration and profits of a private insurance company are over 10%, and traditional Medicare is closer to 2%. We can't afford anymore to subsidize the private health insurance industry.
In terms of working with private insurance companies, if someone asked me if I were to do medicine all over again, that would probably be one of the main reasons why I would choose not to. Health is seen as a business and not a right. And when we have something like Medicare for All, there's a shift in the energy and it becomes a right.
This fight is not only about covering the uninsured, it's about improving coverage for all of us. Today, health insurance does not cover all of the health needs of our patients. Many things are completely excluded: dental care, long-term care, eye care, mental health care. This is about covering the 29 million uninsured, but this fight is also about improving coverage for everyone.
Private insurers add nothing to the value of our healthcare system.
I support Medicare for All because the status quo is simply unjust and unsustainable. My patients, they are trapped in false choices of picking between going to the doctor and taking care of their health or getting by, scraping by financially.
Medicare for All is the only way to sustainably achieve universal health care.
Here's a radical idea. The function of health care should be to provide quality care to every man, woman, and child as a right, not to make tens of billions in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. So let us stand up, let's have the guts to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies, and let us finally do what should have been done decades ago and make certain that healthcare is a human right, not just a privilege.
Ron, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike.
Dr. Mike. Okay.
I'm going to
So,
keep you on task.
Yeah. So the first person I welcome speaking tonight is my great friend and really one of my big role models in the world, Dr. Paul Song. So Dr. Paul Song is a radiation oncologist. He has been involved in progressive causes for a long time, including being a past executive director of the Courage Campaign, and he is the current sitting president of Physicians for a National Health Program. California sits on the national board. My friend Paul Song.
First of all, I want to just thank Ron and Lisa for hosting us here tonight. Secondly, I think that Ron is actually somebody I admire and look up to. One, he's a dermatologist that not only accepts insurance, which is unheard of, especially here in California, but he also takes care of those that don't have insurance and those that have Medicaid. In this state that are willing to accept and see Medicaid patients is no small task. So really, Ron, thank you for being there. Just really briefly, I want to just say one thing about my story. My mom actually came to the United States in 1951 as a refugee during the Korean War. And she eventually would end up graduating from Columbia Teachers College. And the first person to hire her was the late, great Shirley Chisholm. So for those of you who may not know who Miss Chisholm is, she was the first African-American woman elected to Congress.
Yes.
She ran for president in 1972 under the mantra of being unbought and unbossed.
Yes.
Nina.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough of that in Washington. But also she, when she was running in 1972, ran with this message that we have never seen healthcare as a right. It has been conceived as a privilege only for those who can afford it, and that's the real reason our healthcare system is in such a scandalous state. And I would submit to you that our healthcare system is in more of a scandalous state now than it was in 1972 when Ms. Chisholm ran for Congress. For president. And here's the situation when we talk about being unbought and unbossed. I can only think of one true candidate who has remained unbought and unbossed all these years, and that's Senator Sanders. So many of us have been fighting for Medicare for all for 10, 15 years. We started at a time when we were looked at as a fringe group, where we alienated some doctors that we might work with, particularly as a radiation oncologist, who wants to refer to the guy that wants Medicare for all. But here's the thing about what's happened. The perception of Medicare for all has changed. And why did it happen? I think for two reasons. One, like the marriage equality fight, where people were able to come out to their family members, their coworkers, their neighbors. People started to share stories of why this healthcare system was not working for them. And the more and more people started to share that or take care of somebody in their family that was navigating through this horrendous, immoral, broken system, the more people realized we're paying so much and getting so little out of it. So that was one. But then the second part was actually a senator from Vermont that decided to make this a centerpiece of his campaign and ran on it 4 years ago. Because prior to that, if you look at the polls that were there for Medicare for All, there wasn't really a clear consensus for it. And now we have an overwhelming majority of people that support Medicare for All. Now, you were going to hear people, particularly in this Democratic primary, who are going to spread the talking points of the private insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. You're going to hear 100 million people being kicked off their private insurance. The reality is, most people don't like their private insurance.
Right.
You're going to hear stories about not being able to see your doctor. Well, guess what? Most of the insurance plans that you have such narrow networks that you can only see about 20% or 25% of the doctors in your actual neighborhood. So when you hear people say, well, it's going to deny access, the private insurance industry is always denying access day after day after day. When you hear stories of waiting lists, I can tell you if you don't have insurance, or you don't have good insurance, or you don't have if you have Medicaid, you're going to wait a long time to see people like Ron. So we need to, one, fight back against these truths and myths, but at the same time, this election is so crucial because I sadly believe that if we don't elect Senator Sanders this time and have a president who aspires for something greater versus somebody who's beholden to the private insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry, then the fight for Medicare for all, sadly, will go away and die. And, you know, I'm getting to a point where I'm not that far from actually qualifying for Medicare, but I would rather see me get a Medicare card that's a Medicare for all card than for me turning 65. Finally, I just want to say one last thing about people saying, well, it'll never happen. It's a pipe dream. I think actually in the last election, it was likened to giving everyone a pony. You know what? There are a lot of countries that have ponies and it works just fine. And the other part is, if you look at the curve of marriage equality, for those of you who fought for marriage equality, my wife and I were really involved in the marriage equality fight back in 2008. But if you look at the curve from 2008 to when marriage equality became law of the land, and if you look at that curve, and now if you look at the curve for Medicare for all over this last 5 years, the curves mirror itself. So keep coming out, sharing what's going on, and let's really fight back against lies. And it starts by electing Senator Sanders as president of the United
States. Great, thank you. So, I just, in the spirit, more not me, us. I want to take another second to recognize another really important group of people here. So there are a bunch of medical students here today. So and a lot of those medical students who are part of, some who are part of Students for a National Health Program, the affiliate of PNHP. UCLA, what schools do we have? UCLA? Okay. All right. Thank you. So the next speaker I want to introduce is another just absolute relentless champion for justice across the board, but especially for Medicare for all, Dr. Bill Honigman. Known everywhere as Dr. Bill. The university known as Dr.
Exactly.
Bill. And Dr. Bill is deeply involved with a very important organization. And one of the things we're going to highlight tonight is a few important organizations that will continue on no matter what happens with this election. Okay, and that when I think about organizing long and short, organizing for this election, but also organizing communities for the long term for healthcare justice in America, when I think about that, I think about this guy, Bill Honigman, who is deeply involved in Progressive Democrats for America. We have their executive director also here. What's your you have a PDA title? Is it just Dr. Bill?
State coordinator.
State coordinator and healthcare issue team.
Right. Now there's another, Dr. Bill has another, he's got a lot of feathers in his cap. And one of them was that in 2016, he was the co-chair for the California delegation to the Democratic National Convention for Bernie Sanders.
All right, Dr. Bill.
Dr. Bill.
All right.
In the house.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks everyone for being here. Alan Minsky, everybody from KPFK. Thank you, Alan, for being here, and thanks for taking over the leadership for PDA. And we're actually two organizations. We're Progressive Democrats America. We're also People Demanding Action. So you can find us, both organizations. The PD America, as we refer to it, is our electoral wing, and so that's why it's very appropriate that we're here in support of Bernie Sanders. We did that in 2016 as well, and in fact in 2012 we were looking at who was going to challenge Hillary Clinton, because if nobody did, our issues would not get talked about. So in 2012 we started to work on convincing Bernie Sanders that he needed to run in the Democratic primary, not as a third-party candidate or some other than, even like they love it. Don't they just love saying Bernie's not really a Democrat? So, but that's okay. He can still run in the Democratic primary. We can still elect him to be the next president of the United States. And so we did that in 2016. Not thinking that he was going to do as well as he did. I mean, I just heard somebody on MSNBC say, he didn't do that well in 2016. Well, he came actually damn close. I think we had 46% of the It's raised awareness. It's why we all even know what Medicare for All is at this point. So, anyhow, if you don't already get our email, because who doesn't need more email? We're going to float a sign-up sheet for PDA, aren't we, Alan? And hopefully you got one of our stickers, our We Want Bernie stickers, and that's actually a good way to reach me is through the website, pdamerican.org, which you can find on the stickers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about doctors, because I am one, and what Medicare for All means to us, or should mean to us generally, and more doctors are starting to see the light here on why it is good for us, and in particular, what we're going to do still to convince more and more people, and through Doctors for Bernie, Physicians for National Health Program, and PDA and all these other terrific groups, we're going to keep raising awareness and doing this. So, let me I'm going to bring up kind of three issues that generally are important to doctors, and whatever's important to doctors are important to patients, right?
Yes.
All the caring professionals. If it's good for us caregivers, then that means it's going to translate into giving good care. What a concept. I have a friend, I live in Orange County, and I have a friend who also lives in Orange County. He's originally from Canada. He's a health systems expert. He studied them. He came here to study us. Interesting, right? And he has developed a kind of an interesting schematic I'm going to share with you. So I know you can't see everything on these pages.
You don't need to.
But I'll just give you a hint. One of them is how we pay for healthcare in America, and the other one is how they pay for healthcare in Canada. Anybody? Bueller? Anybody? So this is it. This is American healthcare. And the interesting thing is, as concerns us caregivers, is that this is where the patient starts, and this is where the provider gets paid. Wow. They get to go through all that. So what does that represent to you?
Waste.
Waste. Not just waste.
Yeah.
Waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right.
That's what this is. It's an opportunity to hide fraud, and whenever they do that, they're abusing our patients, and that abuses us as well. So I'm going to tell you about three things as regards doctors. First of all is cost. Okay, everybody knows that we are spending a tremendous amount of money on this. Anyone know about how much that is in the doctor's office? I know Michael Lighty knows. But, how much a typical doctor's office or clinic spends on, chasing paper and all that stuff, being on the phone like you heard those doctors in the video?
Time?
about how much?
60.
20%.
60%.
Well, that's a little high. Yeah, it's closer to 25 or 30%.
I'm like
of
60.
all of the intake, all of the revenue that comes into a clinic, it's as much as 25 to 30%, you know, overhead just to deal with this. Okay, traditional Medicare operates at
3%.
even lower, like
Yeah.
1.5%. I think it's the actual figure, but we'll settle for 2%. You know, so that's very important for doctors. Why? All that time on the phone, not just eating into your paycheck, but all the time on the phone means time away from your patient. What happens then? Compliance. That's the second C word. So cost, compliance, okay? Meaning that, what does that mean in medical terms? Compliance. Nancy?
Poor care.
It means they're not going to follow your plan. It means you're not going to have the time to explain what your health plan is to your patient. What happens then? Their outcomes are lousy. Who gets blamed for that? The healthcare provider. What happens then? You get sued. So everyone here should know that malpractice in universal healthcare countries, particularly single-payer ones where there is no bill, there's no fee at the point of service, as we know, we have twice the malpractice rate as those other countries. And why is that? Because we don't have the trust. We don't have that level of comfort. That's the third word, is comfort that we have with our patient, our physician. As Michael knows, is very aptly pointed out many times, is that in Japan, for example, they see their patients on average 13 times a year compared to our 4 times a year. Wow. So you tell me who's got a better patient-physician relationship, okay? And how much less likely, I mean, they don't have a bill when they leave the hospital, you know, so that helps. I mean, lawyers like to go after the big bills, right? So, but more importantly, they have that time to sit and talk with their patients and answer questions, end of life care, that kind of thing. So, so let me just bring up the final thing here. I mean, 2 things actually from my own experience. I retired recently. I was an emergency room physician here in Southern California for 37 plus years, who's counting? And you know, 30 of those years I was with Kaiser in Orange County. And I can tell you that Kaiser, over the years, introduced more and more of this phony marketing and, you know, as far as I was concerned, corrupt business practices, basically waste, fraud, and abuse, right? But they would do it because they said they needed the market share. For example, what they call a skinny plan. Anyone know what that is? It doesn't mean weight loss. It means your coverage is skinny, and that means that it's a high deductible plan, right? So what kind of business model is that for an HMO, health maintenance organization, that's supposed to keep you healthy? That's how they lower their costs. Instead, they're introducing a plan where people are going to refuse care and then have to meet time and again on my overnight shift in the ER, where people would refuse a CAT scan or refuse an ultrasound. We have a very good friend in the movement. Her daughter died because of a blood clot. Basically, they told her at the door in this hospital she presented to that it would cost her, I think, $3,000 or $4,000, and she said, "No, I'll just go home with my sore leg." 23-year-old who died as a result. So people would refuse tests. You know, next thing I know, I'm busy working the ER. Someone says, "Oh, that patient left," and you know, so every time a patient would leave, I would have to suspect that was going on. Besides the usual stuff that was more and more frustrating, like dental infections. I mean, every night on my overnight shift, I would see somebody with a dental infection. They just let it get so bad that they ended up oftentimes needing IVs, or they had sepsis and, you know, needed to be admitted to intensive care. So, you know, that's why it's good for us as healthcare providers that compliance, where they're going to actually do what you think they need, you know, because that's why you did all your training and everything, right? That's why they came to you to begin with. The other example I'll give to you is from my own practice is this horrible thing that's known as a copay. Bernie likes to call them co-payments. I don't know if that's a Brooklyn thing, but you know, I would tell you that to see me in an HMO emergency room, they introduced a copay of $100. Most patients had a copay of $100. And in the middle of the night, if you're having chest pain, you know, you're trying to decide, okay, is this you know, acid reflux? Is this heartburn, or is this a real heart attack, right? So do you want people to stay home because they're worried about the $100? No. Right. You want them to come in, get an EKG, go over your stuff, get an exam, right? So that's, again, very divisive and likely even to, you know, to kill a patient every so often. I can tell you, when I would tell somebody in the emergency room that they were just having heartburn, not a heart attack, the next thought was, do I still have to pay the $100? And again, I, like, you know, what could I say at that point, right? That's the plan that they signed up for. So, so that's kind of two examples. My background is I grew up here. You're supposed to start with your background. I grew up in kind of the east side of LA, Monterey Park, Montebello. My father was a family doctor in East LA for many years, just like a stone's throw from USC County Hospital. And I used to go into the office with him all the time and, you know, do his paperwork and stuff like that. So I learned about insurance billing and Medi-Cal and Medicare billing and that kind of thing. Before that, even as a kid, I would go with him on house calls. House calls. Some of us are old enough to remember that. You know, a doctor came with a little black bag to your house, right? So he had one of those black bags, in fact. I had one too, but it was his. He gave it to me. I don't think I ever used it. So, but I can tell you that, you know, it's like when a family would see him come, there was obviously relief in their eyes. You know, for whatever reason, they weren't going to the hospital. I don't know. Maybe somebody had a back alley abortion or something. I don't know. I was never told this kind of thing, but, you know, I suspect something like that. I was always, as a kid, I was sat down in the kitchen with some homemade pie or something like that. My dad would usually come out with a very worried look after seeing the patient, you know, and say things to me like, God, they really should go to the hospital, but they won't, you know, things like that. So I can tell you also that by the time I was a teenager, I was able to scrub in on cases in the operating room with him. He was a family doctor, GP, later went on to FP, but he could, in those days, before malpractice carriers told you couldn't anymore, he could scrub in on a case with his best friend, who was the general surgeon. So they would do, you know, an appendix every once in a while. I was going to say appy, the doctors in the crowd, and there's or a gallbladder or something like, you know, pretty garden variety stuff, you know. But I can also tell you that my dad's friend, the surgeon, would send my dad out to the waiting room to tell the family how the patient did, because he had that kind of trust, that relationship. I think we're sorely missing that at this point, and I see Medicare for All as restoring that patient-physician trust. Yes. I see it as a tremendous value. Not just to doctors, obviously to your coworkers, to your patients, also to your own families, your friends, colleagues, your community. It'll be a tremendous value to this country. And I think that's the way we need to start looking at Medicare for All in general, and in particular at Bernie Sanders as the strongest, most stalwart messenger that I have ever known on this subject, and we have that opportunity to elect him president. So yes. Thank you. Yes.
So more people people I want to recognize in the audience before we hear from our next speaker, Erica. Embarrassing. So one of the places that I work is a federally qualified health center that is now called Eisner Health. And a number of folks who do primary care there, all family practitioners, are here tonight, and I want to recognize them for their work and Dr. Austin, Dr. Crespo, and Dr. Avila. It's been such a privilege to work alongside them and learn from them. And one thing that I want people to understand about the race and about the some of what's at stake that is well known to some people, that other people may be coming around to understanding this, which is that there is a real difference between candidates who are talking about actually doing Medicare for all, of which the most clear proponent is Bernie Sanders, and other candidates who are talking about we really should do some kind of universal health care, or I would like to expand insurance coverage to lots of people and maybe everybody. And I want to talk to you for a second about why that's different. So at the clinic where we work, we take care of a lot of very poor people, right? So, and some of the poorest people in Los Angeles County. A lot of them are undocumented brothers and sisters. A lot of them are people of color. A lot of them are people who just don't, of all colors and backgrounds, who don't have money. And the patients there have a mix of plans and programs paying for them. There are some people there who have Medicare, but way more, there are people who have Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid in California, which a third of people in California have. And there are also, a lot of people who are covered under a program called My Health LA, which is a program that LA County does for the undocumented. Now, another person in the audience who I want to recognize, named Brenda Gazzar, who's sitting straight up there, recently, who's a journalist and who likes to spread word about the Medicare for All stuff. So came to the clinic to do a story and a podcast with me about a group of 3 patients who I saw in October of 2018. Now these are very representative of patients that we see all the time. They came in on sort of within a week, and they all had a squamous cell carcinoma, which is a potentially deadly skin cancer on their face. And they happened to be, I guess, a little lucky that there was a dermatologist who works in this setting, because as Paul mentioned, not too many do that. But they needed something that I don't do there, another subspecialty service called Mohs surgery. And really quick, I want to tell you about these 3 patients. So one was a homeless man, but he'd been homeless for a long time. He'd gotten a lot of the sun. He was over 65 and he had Medicare. And he had a squamous cell carcinoma. Another one was a documented immigrant from Mexico, Latino, and he had Medi-Cal and had squamous cell carcinoma on his face. And there was another patient who was undocumented and had squamous cell carcinoma on his face. And all of these folks needed this particular surgery to cure their potentially deadly skin cancer. The guy with Medicare, I was able to find him somebody to do it in 1 week. It took me 6 months for both of those other people to find the person who would do their care. So when people say, well, why don't we do a piecemeal program to help the undocumented? Or why don't we expand Medi-Cal more? Why don't we divide up the crumbs on the wrong side of the apartheid tracks of our medical system? Yeah. That is why we're here for Medicare for all and not for just universal health care. it's important for people to know that what's at stake. So, next speaker is, I would say when I first became aware of Erica Ferriston, who I think is one of the most incredible political activists I've ever met. So Erica lives in Pacific Palisades, but I first met her when we were working on the issue of SB 562, which was a bill to do Medicare for all in California.
Right.
Led by the nurses industry.
Right.
And Erica is relentless. And Erica had organized a group of people to every Sunday so there's the Hamilton the musical was going on at the Pantages for months and months and months and months. And she got a group of people to every Sunday go to the Hamilton musical, dress up like characters from Hamilton, and talk to people when they were feeling like, the inspirational feeling, and talk to them there and sing to them about Medicare for all. But it's like just kind of the tip of the iceberg. She is now the chair of Healthcare for All Los Angeles, which is a community group, not a healthcare providers group, a community group dedicated to Medicare for all. She is also the president of the Pacific Palisades Democratic Club. So she knows how to do it on the streets. She knows how to do it in protest. She knows how to do it creatively. She knows about building coalition. And so she is an incredible asset in our movement. And it is such an honor and pleasure to have Erica here.
Yeah. My girl.
Well, there is a healthcare revolution going on, and how many of you are part of the healthcare revolution? I am so touched to be here with all of you, and thank you again to our hosts, Ron and Lisa. Thank you to all of you who braved the parking situation. These are the fighters I want to be. And to be with Dr. Song and Dr. Bill and Michael Leidy, who led the fight with the California nurses who brought us for those of you who don't know, we had a bill here in California for single-payer health care or Medicare for all. It was called Senate Bill 562, and it passed the state Senate. And then it was shelved by but we had fierce leader Michael Leidy and the California nurses. I'm pointing at Gina, who's By the way, there is a candidate. Her name is Maria Estrada.
Yes, Maria.
And she is primarying Anthony Rendon.
Yes. Please support Maria.
And she is bad.
She is fierce.
She's fierce. Again, my name is Erica, and I am the new co-chair of Healthcare for All Los Angeles, along with Maureen Cruz. She has been in this fight for so long. I'm new to it, and she's taken me under her tutelage and has taught me everything I know. So, love Maureen. As Ron said, Healthcare for All Los Angeles is dedicated to getting single payer or Medicare for all here in California, but right now we've joined our forces to get it nationally with Bernie Sanders. And so what we really are, so we have our physicians, PNHP, we have our nurses, NNU, Cal nurses, and then we have Healthcare for All Los Angeles. We are your boots on the ground.
That's right.
And we need our doctors because they have a way with people. we need our nurses, but we need an army of people to get single payer passed, because even when Bernie Sanders wins, and it is going to take Bernie Sanders, there is no other candidate that will lead us to this victory. But even with Bernie at the helm as president, he needs us. We have to be on the streets. We have to be in the legislators' offices. We cannot accept compromise. I think it was rightly pointed out that we have candidates, we have legislators that are co-opting the language. They're using the right language. They're saying, oh, I support single payer, but, and here comes the but, I'm not sure if it's practical, or they'll say, well, I support universal health care. It's not the same thing as single payer. Single payer is publicly funded through, one payer. Universal health care could mean, insurance company, one insurance company. That's not what we're talking about. So I put on your seats a couple of flyers. This is one of my favorites from PNHP. One side is public single payer versus public option. Public option is, a strategy that they're using to confuse people. They make you think it's single payer, but it's not. It keeps the pay-to-play insurance companies intact, and that is not what we want. We want single payer. So this is a great one. And on the other side is, it says, when you hear a politician promise Medicare for all or universal coverage, ask yourself, how does their plan measure up? A well-designed single-payer national health program would, and it lists you what to look for. So this is how you know the faux plans from the real plan, Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders. And so anyway, just we love you. We need you to join us. We need you to educate yourselves. That's one of the things our organization does. It helps educate. We partner with organizations like PNHP, like the nurses, like Democrat Socialists of America, and we're looking for some board members. If you're interested, come see me. But yes, single payer, never compromise.
That's right.
Woo!
So I do teach medicine, and one of the traditions is that sometimes we ask people who are in training or learning questions, and so I want to ask, and we are really all in training. We're all always trying to learn more, but I want to ask this room a question. It's a pretty simple one, but which is this: does Medicare for all cost more for the country or less? For the country? Less. So it's always important to provide evidence for that. And I want to mention a couple things that are out there. So one, there's just every other industrialized country, and actually every other country in the world, including all the countries that provide stuff like Medicare for all in their country. So there's the empiric evidence across the entire world. A couple of our members just put out a really great study of sort of a meta-analysis, like an overview of a bunch of studies of everybody who's ever analyzed an economic study for Medicare for all or for single payer in states or in the country. And almost without exception, there's just a couple of exceptions, but when a polity in these economic forecasts adapt this, they pay less, not more. And some of those savings are how also we will cover everybody. It's also the countries that do Medicare for all, which actually spend less on healthcare, cover everybody, are able to spend more on other important things. Because we know that health isn't all just about care provided by doctors and nurses, right? It's the health of communities, it's education, it's the social determinants of health, housing, all these other important things. So, but if it seems like I'm getting a little bit into the nitty gritty, you're really gonna, and you're gonna like our next. Okay, so our next speaker is Michael Light. So I first became aware of Michael Lighty in the fight for SB 562, and where he was really leading the policy and political effort for the California Nurses Association. And his work in doing that is, to me, is like stuff of legend. But I saw it with my own eyes. And so Michael is now part of the Bernie team. As I said, he is the director of healthcare constituencies. He and San flew down to be with us tonight. And so my just esteemed friend and colleague, Michael.
Very nice. That was way too nice. Thank you all, and thank you, Ron and Lisa, for hosting. Those kind words about 562, what everyone said. So thank you. I am so damn proud to be here on the night we won the New Hampshire. Yeah! So I got this very cool button from Myra, and I got my New Hampshire button, so I'm set. We are at this moment. This is, for those of us who have been doing this for a while, and for those of us who have just been doing it for a couple of years, this is the most extraordinary moment for our movement for Medicare for All that we have ever seen. And it is a moment not necessarily because we've won the policy debate. We have won the policy debate, by the way. Because every study that Ron mentioned, that the researchers had shown, really did prove, yes, you can save money, cover everybody. Okay. We are in this moment because of the political time we're in. This is our high point because of the political movement we built and the political strength that we have developed. That is why the industry campaign against us is more vociferous than since 1993. Right. That is why we have Democratic candidates for president saying we will not put a candidate on the ticket who supports Medicare for all. We have a Speaker of the House who has said, I'm not so fond of it. These are not accidents. This is the industry fighting back, using the best cover that they have, which are, unfortunately, other Democrats in many cases. Not only, we know the existential threat that the Trump administration and the Republican Party presents to our health. They simply don't give a damn.
That's right.
They simply don't care. And so we know what that fight is about. But how do you fight that? How do you fight nothing? Do you fight it with a little something, or do you fight it with a solution? I am so tired of hearing about these Midwestern pragmatists who don't solve the problem. If you don't solve the problem. What is the problem? The problem is we do not get the health care we need.
That's right.
We're paid for it. We cannot afford the health care we need.
That's right.
That is the problem. How do you solve that problem? You guarantee health care. You guarantee health care with no barriers to care. That's what all those other countries have done. And at that moment of realization, yes, we can guarantee health care as a human right. That is what has opened up this political moment for us on this issue. People say, well, how, the industry, I call them the Partnership for Future Healthcare Profits. But I don't know that's their name. Their name is something else. But they spend $1.5 million. They spend $1.5 million in Iowa trashing Medicare for all. On the polls of folks going into the caucus, 57% of people supported Medicare for all.
That's right.
Right? In New
have those
Hampshire,
numbers.
the exit polls, 57% of voters supported Medicare for all. Now, I gotta ask, and maybe we've considered this before, in what country in the world where 60, 70% of your supporters want a policy, you don't support it? That's the Democratic Party. It's unique, let's face it, it's unique. Right? But that's where we are. And people say, well, how are people still supporting Medicare for all? Well, because there's another poll that is often not discussed. And I think it's very telling. A few months ago, Morning Consult did this poll and they asked, what do you think should happen to the future of the American healthcare system? 30% said it needed fundamental change. Another 46% said it needed to be completely rebuilt. I'm not sure what the difference is. But I know it adds up to 76%. 76% of people saying it's got to change fundamentally. In our guts and in our hearts, we know the healthcare system is broken.
That's right.
We don't need, so when you can put as many ads as you want, you can have these pundits talking about what you can't have, or it's never going to happen, or you can have candidates say, no, I'm never going to do that, or I can't do that, or it's not real. And yet people know in our guts that it has to change. That our life is literally on the line. So let's go back to first principles. When Senator Sanders talks in that short video at the end, he says something very important. What is a healthcare system for? What is a healthcare system for? Is it for the revenue and profits of healthcare corporations? Because that's what we've had since 1980. We've had an industry. We've developed into an industry where money, as Elizabeth Rosenthal has said, money is the metric of good medicine. And I believe that the doctors in the room can vouch for that. Why do we have the most elaborate electronic and medical record systems in the world that don't talk to each other? Because they're proprietary billing systems. They are not health records. They are billing systems designed to maximize the revenue for that corporation. And through that proprietary software. That's what we're up against. So when we go back to first principles, we talk about why is Medicare for All at the heart of this campaign? Because Medicare for All represents something profound that is often very difficult to come by in this society, and that is social solidarity.
Yes.
Social solidarity, where we say, I'm going to contribute to this healthcare system, not because I'm sick today, but because I'm going to help you get better because you're sick today, because tomorrow I'm going to be sick, and you're going to help me.
Yes.
Other countries have developed national healthcare systems. They have discovered and they have built a greater sense of social solidarity. And we can too. We can. And this demand for Medicare for All, we also have to understand, is rooted in people's economic experience. The other thing that the exit poll showed in New Hampshire tonight, there wasn't just 57% support for Medicare for All. If you earned $50,000 or less a year, 70% of those folks supported it. You earn $100,000, between $50,000 and $100,000, 63% of those folks supported it. When you got to over $100,000, it got to be about 50-50. But we have to understand this. I know it's tough in California. Most people in this country don't make $100,000. Most people in this country don't make $60,000. And when they are faced with a deductible of $1,600 or a 20% copay of $3,000 for even maybe minor surgery, most folks don't have $400 in the bank.
Yep.
So let's get real. Let's have a reality check about what this issue is also about. This issue is about the economic viability It's about our ability to just live with human dignity in the society to meet our basic needs. So when we win Medicare for all, yes, workers are going to get thousands of dollars in a raise. We're going to have the peace of mind that comes from health security. And we are going to lift up students and teachers because states are going to have more money for education. And we're going to build a sense of solidarity among us because we're literally taking care of each other. So yes, this issue is at the heart of this campaign because it is the heart of the social transformation and it is at the heart of the political revolution that we are winning.
Yeah. So, we know there's questions in the audience, and I wanted to do this as written questions. And one of the reasons why is, I'll tell you why, because everybody in this room, whether they have been a provider of care, or a patient, or takes care of family members, could in fact give a manifesto on what's wrong with our current system. But what I want you all to come away with is your questions answered so that you can talk to the rest of the world. In other words, answering your questions, so that whether they're your questions or the questions you know other people are going to have as they're getting more aware of both the Sanders campaign and the fight for Medicare for all. That's what I want our questions to be about. So, did people get the cards? So if we have some, I'll just start to read them. Can I get any? And if you have them as we go, we'll do questions.
Does anyone need a card?
Yeah, and okay. So I got a couple. Okay. For the panel. This is a good one. This is political question. Won't including Medicare for all on the platform be too polarizing and thus lead to a Trump victory?
No.
Education.
So it's a good question because it's not the first time that I've heard that. So, do you want to take that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Here's the point. If we're in a fight with Trump, who's going to take away health care. Oh, sorry.
Wait, hang on.
Yeah.
I can hear you, but they can't. That's the problem.
Are we good now?
Yeah, as long as you talk into the mic, it's good. If you're
I can stand right here.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, all of the mics are rigged to the server or the mixer. So.
All right, just quickly. If we're in a fight with someone who's going to take away health care, the best counter argument is to guarantee health care.
Right.
And what we found is that incremental solutions don't work because they end up empowering the insurance companies without ever solving the problem. So if you're in a fight with Trump who's saying, okay, I'm going to take away the ACA, or I'm going to repeal the ACA, or I'm going to lower premiums, you damn well better have a system that says we're going to lower costs and we're going to improve coverage. We're not just going to lower costs and leave you out there with a yucky health plan. We're going to make it better. So we think that fight between someone who's going to take it away versus someone who's going to guarantee it is a much better fight. He's going after Medicare, he's going after Medicaid, he's going after Social Security. We're going to be on the other side of those issues. And we're going to see those same voters who earn under $50,000 a year, they're not just Democrats.
No.
A majority of Republicans earning $30,000 or less support Medicare for all. This is a way to take it to his white working class base. That's what Medicare for all is.
I also kind of just want to point out that I'm starting to wonder this rhetoric of we're going to lose on that. Is it coming from the people propping up the insurance industry?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how sincere that rhetoric is because Bernie Sanders has been running on this Medicare for All platform since 2016, and it's something like, 70% of the country supports Medicare for all. Here in California, over 80% of Democrats support single-payer Medicare for all. So Bernie is anything if consistent, and he's been going into these red areas or white areas or whatever you want to call them. He has never changed. His message is the same, and he is winning people over. So I kind of doubt the premise to begin with.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So just kind of as a political junkie, I don't know, I remember in third grade walking my neighborhood for school bond measures, but so, you know, it goes back that far here in Monterey Park. But I think that people who say that, whether they know it or not, are stuck in a mindset. They're kind of in a box. They painted themselves into a corner thinking that politics is linear, that it's right, left, center, center right, center left. So, you know, I think it's not. I think right and left meet around back, you know, which actually, you might remember in the last campaign when Bernie didn't win the nomination, mostly the late night comedians were interviewing people on their driveways and stuff, and they were saying stuff like, well, I would have voted for Bernie, but he didn't make it in the finals. You know, like it's like a sporting event. You know, there's finals. So you know, and so they were voting for Trump, and it was an expression of how frustrated they were with the system. And when it comes down to it, there are a lot of Trump voters that I will never be able to relate to, and you know, a lot of us have I think pondered who are or were the Trump voters. But there's a lot of them who are regular people, and they were looking for a way to deal with the critical issues of our time, like climate, like healthcare, like student debt. So, so I think this is a very much politically, you know, common ground kind of issue, and people like that, you know, who say things like that and think like that frustrate me to no end, because they need to start thinking out of the box and, you know, realize that what we all have in common is clean air, clean water. We want our kids to do well in life, and we want ourselves and our family and friends and everyone we know to have health.
That's right. Yes.
Next question. And actually, I think I'm going to answer this one quickly. So if government is the payer, how do we protect medical coverage from being dictated by the party in power? And so, does anybody remember the keep your government hands off my Medicare? So Medicare itself is like a third rail of American politics. So, however ideological the Republican Party is, see what happens when they even talk about cutting Medicare or cutting Social Security. In other words, once everybody is in, the political logic dictates that every party that in a democracy becomes responsive to the demand for that. That's what we don't have now. In other words, the Republican Party doesn't give a damn about the people on Medi-Cal, right? And so they never fight for those folks. Ooh, go after Medicare. Okay. Okay, this is kind of like an economic question. So, how do you answer the concern of pent-up demand? If we have Medicare for all, won't that cause a shortage of care?
Well, quickly, so the UMass Amherst researchers looked at this question, and it is actually at the heart of a lot of the issues we get into about the cost of Medicare for all, because one of the things that we're going to find is that if use goes up, then the costs go up. And that's where, if you found an outlier study, the study that does project very high increases in utilization, the Urban Institute study does show Medicare for all costing more than the other studies. So there is this question. However, when we've looked at it, and the PNHP researchers have looked at it recently, they saw when we expanded coverage under Medicare in Canada, when they went to a single payer system, and when we expanded the ACA coverage, Those with insurance did not suffer any loss of necessary care, very marginal changes in their access, and those who got new coverage were able to get the services that they needed without any rationing or extended wait times. So basically we have empirical proof that these transitions can occur. We know, for example, that those who are underinsured or uninsured, currently we're paying for those folks. They're currently getting care, but they're getting about half as much care in the case of the uninsured, about $5,000 worth of care on average versus 10. They will get more. We anticipate that's going to be a kind of a 15% utilization under the Amherst model. And so that's completely something we can accommodate. The truth is, doctors, as you all know, spend a lot of time on paperwork. We were talking about that. We estimate, PNP estimates, you can reduce that time and free up 4 to 5 clinical hours a week per doctor. Under Medicare for All, you add 4 to 5 hours clinical to each doc, we're going to be able to absolutely care for folks who are newly covered.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. I love this question because we have Michael and Sam here. We know that they have Bernie's ear. So why, with 3 questions, does Bernie not answer that Medicare for All will be paid by the 30% skimmed by medical insurance companies? In other words, the question is about Bernie's rhetorical approach to the savings and what do you think? Right, savings from the waste and the. Yeah.
Well, I think what Senator Sanders wants to do first is not get into a debate over all of the policy details and weeds. Because that's frankly a standard that no other candidate and no other issue is expected to meet. So we don't want to play that game, number one. Number two, he does say it's going to cost everybody less, and it's going to cost the system less, and it's going to cost each of us less. When he was before a union audience in Las Vegas, he was very specific. He talked about the casino owner spending $15,000 a worker on healthcare, and under his bill, they would spend $3,000, and that $12,000 would go into the workers' pockets. So in those forms, we're very specific. I think in general, the case that we want to make is that we're a rich country, we can afford this. And at that level, it kind of operates politically to common sense. You get into a discussion, as I think Senator Warren frankly found out, you start parsing these issues, well, at this income level, or we're going to do a per capita tax on everybody, and then we're going to fill it in with these millionaire taxes, and it's not really a tax on the middle class. I mean, it got pretty complicated, and it probably didn't do her well. And so to the extent that you get mired in those kind of discussions, you lose the point. And the point is we're going to guarantee health care. We're the richest country in the world. Of course we can afford it. They never say we can't afford anything else. We can afford this.
That's right.
But the details are on his website, BernieSanders.com.
Okay. So this is a good one. We hit it a little bit, but I love it because I want to kind of direct this one toward Erica because she's been so sort of good about talking about this. But many of my moderate friends say they are afraid to lose their private insurance and say, why not just do a public option? What are
It's dead on arrival.
So what are reasons against public option? Okay.
Well, why don't we let Dr. Paul start
Yes.
So, a couple things. The public option doesn't solve all of the inefficiencies of our healthcare system. So there are several things that you have to worry about why a single payer system really accomplishes that a public option doesn't. One is, under a single payer, you do away with the pure administrative waste. With a public option, you just introduce another payer into the mix. You don't get the economy of savings with, again, adding another payer to the mix versus having a single payer that can negotiate pharmaceutical prices. hospital costs, doctor's visits on behalf of the entire population versus just the small percentage that it takes care of. You know, when United Healthcare uses its market cap to negotiate deep discounts for its subscribers, which it doesn't pass on to its subscribers, it passes on to its shareholders, it's considered to be good free market, good business sense. But Medicare is not allowed to do that right now. Imagine if you had one payer that acted on behalf of all of us collectively in this room that negotiated the best possible prices across the board. So you get bulk discount savings and negotiations, you get the efficiency of having one payer. When you have, say, some of you have United Healthcare through your employer today, you get a new job next week, or you stay with the same job and then you get Aetna, and then maybe you lose your job and you're Medicaid, and you try to go to one doctor, that doctor's office has to spend all the time figuring out, am I in your network, what's your copay, what's your deductible, what hospital can I admit you to, what drugs can I prescribe, and that gets complicated each time with a new health insurance plan. So all that inefficiency goes away, but if you have a public option, all you do is add one more layer to our already complicated, screwed up system.
Yeah.
So maybe one for Dr. Bill, because I bet you've heard this one. I've heard this one. How will physician compensation be affected under Medicare for All?
So, yeah, we talked about that a little bit, or I talked about it. We're having a conversation. Already doctors, providers of all kinds will have that savings of that 25% overhead that is required to process all these insurance claims, right? So there's a savings already, meaning, more time, more money in your pocket as a provider. This is a lesson I learned actually when I did my father's billings in his office, is that, Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid, of course, in California, it doesn't pay very well compared to Medicare, pays much better. And then, private insurance pays better, but there's all that hassle in trying to get paid from private insurance, right? So it's not, as I tell people, it's not Medicare that doctors refuse, it's Medi-Cal, because it pays so poorly. It also doesn't cover as much in terms of comprehensive care for people in general, although it does cover dental, or some dental, so, which is a good thing. So in that respect, we're looking at, that's why we call it Medicare for all, not Medicaid for all, or Medi-Cal for all. And it's Medicare for all, not Medicare for some. So if everybody has Medicare, doctors will make better money than, if you're taking other kinds of insurances, either too high or too high where you have to hassle so much to get paid, or too low where you don't get paid enough. That's very important. It really provides two functions that way. It's quality of care, which is ultimately what we're concerned most with, that our patients are getting the best care that we know in our training that they need, and then it's a good reimbursement that you can actually live on. What a concept, right? A living wage, and for all the time you spent in your training.
We do think that one of the advantages of the Medicare for All system, for example, is we're going to move to aging in place. So we're going to fund home-based health care, and we're going to fund services at home for people with disabilities. So there's going to be a real shift from an institutional bias to a more home care based system, and I think you'll see that reflected also in terms of alternative therapies and other innovations in care.
So, okay, this is more a political question, which is how do you discuss concerns about Bernie not being electable? So somebody just says like him, it doesn't seem to be. I mean,
happened tonight?
Yeah. Right. It's a little bit like the pragmatism thing, isn't it?
Nobody likes him.
How can how can Bernie win if he keeps winning?
But let's be fair. So winning a Democratic primary is not the same as winning a general election. That's what the question. That's what the question is about. So
right. No, I mean I think it's a fair question. Obviously, it's a real question. It's what on everybody's mind. It's also the question. Ultimately, it's what you can't know. You literally can't know who's electable. You can't. So what you have to evaluate is, well, who's got, a kind of reach into those constituencies? Who could reach white working class voters, say in Michigan and Wisconsin? Well, the guy who won the primary there last time. 12% of Trump voters said that they would support Senator Sanders. That's an indication he's got inroads into that base. I think you also look at the track record of he has won in, people think Vermont's a lefty state. Vermont is not a lefty state. It wasn't a lefty state when he was first running for Congress. So he was beating Republicans and he was getting Republican support in doing so. And I think finally, if you actually track where Senator Sanders does well, is precisely in those areas where we can recapture white working class votes, where we can speak to students and people of color. It's both the emerging electorate and I think the historically disenfranchised electorate among the working class. So to me, he strikes me as the most electable candidate because he actually matches, both in terms of program and constituency, where politics are this year.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd add to that is if the concern is, could he beat Trump? In my opinion, he's the only Democrat candidate who could beat Trump. And here's two easy things to, communicate. Number one, Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden, I think Biden has 44 billionaires donating to him, and Pete Buttigieg is behind with 40 billionaires donating to him. Bernie Sanders has no billionaires donating to him, yet he has raised more money than all the candidates running, except for Bloomberg because he's self-financed. So, but anyway, so when Pete Buttigieg gets a check for $500,000, so that's maybe 2 votes. The vote of the person who gave him the check and the vote of their spouse. When Bernie Sanders gets a check for $500,000, his average donation is $18. So whatever 500,000, divided by 18, that translates into votes. Because when people give money, they're going to vote. And Bernie Sanders has 1 million volunteers. Some of them are in this room. Me and Paul, who are out there, and James knocking on doors and making phone calls. Nobody else has 1 million volunteers. We are going to need an army to defeat Donald Trump because he's given the top 1% everything they've wanted. And they have the money, the power, and clearly mainstream media. So Bernie Sanders is the only candidate who can beat Donald Trump.
So two more questions, and then we're going to do a little talk about organizing. So I just want you to see the shape of the end game here. So will the government control treatment options and limit them under Medicare for All?
So I think a Medicare for All would be evidence-based, unlike our current healthcare system. And when people say they don't want the government to get between them and their doctor, well, the private insurance industry is constantly getting between you and your doctor, or us and our patients day after day. They're the ones that are telling you what doctors you can see. They're the ones telling us what doctors we can refer you to. They're telling us what hospital you can go to. So the idea that somehow a government entity would eliminate your choice or take away your freedom is absolutely wrong. It's the private insurance industry that does that day after day after day.
Just quickly. The best counter, I think, to this notion that it's a government-run healthcare system is to say it's a doctor-run or provider-run healthcare system, and that's really the difference. And finally, it's putting caregivers in charge again, and I think we have to be clear about that.
Yes.
Can I have quickly?
I worked for a group that's motto is Thrive for 30 plus years. And they like to think of it organizationally as like a three-legged stool, like the providers are one of the legs, the hospitals and staff are another one, and then the third one is the insurance company, right? It's the business leg of the three-legged stool. So, so they say you can't do away with one of the legs of the stool, it falls over, right? So, so sit on the floor. I don't care. The providers who work for Kaiser are excellent. And they do their work in a group model practice. It's what we call multidisciplinary, meaning all specialists sit down together, with technicians, nursing staff, and decide, what is going to keep our patients healthy. That's the concept of a health maintenance organization. What medications or therapies will actually make people worse, not better, So that's not being done. There is no regard for it. When a drug detail person comes into your office and tries to fill your head with a bunch of nonsense, you could be more comfortable in a group model practice. You could be more comfortable with the, Marcus Welby type doctor committed. We say that's medicine by committed instead of committee. That's up to you. You might be more comfortable, but those healthcare providers should have the opportunity to get all the best information and come to a decision as to what is a best practice. And that's what this allows us to do. You no longer will practice based on a insurance or some corrupt business model. You're practicing on a purely professional model, and that should be really important to all of us healthcare providers.
So this one is going to be the last question, although I know I will stay around to answer any question anybody has till you leave my home. And actually, I may follow you out the door and keep answering. Okay. So I promise you that nobody will leave with an unanswered question. But here, last one. So will people who don't want the government to know about their private health issues have an option to stay private and out of the government system?
Well, first of all the patient records will be confidential and the government will not have access to any patient information. Unlike the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies who are constantly buying and selling our personal health information on a daily basis. So that won't happen. But yes, on the other question, doctors are all in or all out of the new system. So if you're in Medicare for All, you can't accept any other payment for covered services. You can totally absent yourself from the system and not accept any payments from Medicare for All. In which case, I don't know where you're going to admit, right? I don't know what hospital you're going to admit to. But you can be just a provider, a primary care provider. I would say, since this is the last question, I wanted to emphasize. The public needs to hear more from doctors, in particular. Yes. Doctors, the fact that a majority of doctors support Medicare for All, the fact that the AMA delegates, came very close to basically, tied on the question, this is hugely significant. The American College of Physicians, huge. If the voters in the Democratic primary knew that doctors want Medicare for All, that doctors believed it was the best thing for your patients, that would go a long way in the Democratic primaries. In California, this is your best chance to save your practice and to create a system that will actually deliver care for your patients. This is the best chance. It will happen March 3rd and it will happen again in November. This really is the most significant move you can make for your patients, for the future of your practice. So I just want to emphasize that again. This political moment, I haven't seen it since 1991, really. I don't know that I'll see it again in my lifetime. And I think that this is our moment, this is our chance, this is our power. We can do this.
Yes.
It's not up to somebody else.
Right.
It's actually up to us.
Yeah, not me, us.
So, all right.
Ron, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, sure.
And
You
I know,
hold? You wanna- yeah.
and I know Dr. Song will back me on this, but as he said, having doctors out there can make this for us. And it's also an opportunity to make amends for past behavior from the AMA. These arguments of I support it but not now, they're the same arguments that we heard in the civil rights movement that were said to Dr. King. I support this but not now, too much too fast, and Dr. King was like, if not now, then when? So it was the AMA who was against Medicare. Johnson strong-armed, the president of the AMA. So this is an opportunity for doctors to help make amends for, past terrible decisions by the AMA. So seize that opportunity. Go doctors.
Join Doctors for Bernie.
So some quick things that are related to organizing and moving forward. So first of all, I want to remind everybody that all this effort can't just be about the important presidential election. We heard about Maria Estrada, but there are elections all over the place that will ultimately have an impact on these things. And one of them I want to highlight, because there are some candidates in the room, is at the grassroots level. There is going to be in the March March election, one of the things we'll be voting for all over Los Angeles County. If you are for example, a Democrat, of which many people in this room are, that you'll be voting for member of the 7 people from each assembly district for member of the Democratic Central Committee of the Los Angeles Democratic Party. And there are a bunch of the candidates who are the Bernie-oriented candidates for this assembly district are in this room. So I would like to recognize first myself.
Go for Ron.
Tina Desiree Berg, who's also been doing all Janine Roan, a tireless activist. Rabbi Jonathan Klein.
All right.
Another tireless activist. Cliff Olin, standing by the fireplace, who is a teacher and a member of UTLA, right, who endorsed Bernie Sanders, right? And wait, am I missing?
Belinda.
Oh, and Belinda. No, wait. Oh, maybe she ducked out. But Belinda, who is a pharmacy student and a very avid organizer. But one thing we're going to do, because not everybody lives in this district, everybody who came tonight will send out recommendations for the Bernie word way to grow all over Los Angeles County. Yes.
I just want to say something very important. I'm very active about the voting system. There are 43 violations on the current LA voting system. 7 of them are absolute fails. I have read the technical report. Please vote on paper and get everybody that you know to take a paper ballot. Do not use the ballot machine.
Yes. Thank you.
And one thing I will tell you is that one of the most vigorous sort of watchdogs on like kind of election stuff, and we know from the Iowa caucusing, and anybody who's been involved in the Democratic Party, which I have been, knows that in fact there are a lot of shenanigans. But one of the best, one of the champions of sort of looking at that stuff systematically, Janine Rohn, is running with us, and so proud of that. So now the next thing is, and we kind of mentioned this as we went, but I'll also say just in terms of the people who are up here, there is some method to the madness. I mean, let's give them all a hand first of all. So what we have, so as I mentioned, this fight lives on beyond this presidential campaign no matter what. And the three organizations, I think, represent three excellent directions. So one is Physicians for a National Health Program. Paul is in the back, but that one gives people in health professions and physicians, but not only physicians, a specific place to focus on Medicare for all, and I assure you we will reach out to you. Next, PDA gives you a great sort of across-the-board progressive organization that certainly features the fight for Medicare for all as one of their central efforts, but if you're a little bit more of like, I've got a number of different issues that I want, great. Healthcare for all is focused on Medicare for all, but is very ecumenical in not just being kind of healthcare providers, but is everybody in the community, including healthcare providers, who want to focus on that. But, and there's stuff for all these organizations, and every one is great. But I want to talk now, as we kind of wrap up, about a set of things that you can do for the Bernie campaign between now and the primary and then on into season. And to do that, I want to invite Mira, my apologies. We're getting to know each other, but so thank you. Mira, my apologies. Come on up, and for a lot of you, we handed out this SCUT list, which is like a doctor-y thing, sort of like the doctor-y list of things to do between now and the election.
Yay!
First of all, I apologize. I'm not as well spoken as all these folks here, but we'll do my best. First, I think we should give it up for Ron because he's. I wanted to really quickly figure out who's already volunteering.
Use the mic.
Oh, sorry. Who's already volunteering for the? I don't usually do this for the campaign currently for Bernie's campaign. 60%?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you. Don't stop.
I just want to quickly say, this is the fight of our lives, right? Like, speak into the mic. Sorry.
You're doing great.
This is the fight of our lives. Whether it is for healthcare, whether it is, this is our big thing here now, but there's so many things, right? Mm-hmm. The environment is huge, right? Like, I have a 3-year-old son, and by 2050, we're expecting up to 1 billion people displaced by climate disasters. He's going to be 34 years old in 2050, and 1 billion people being displaced ultimately means war, right? It means scarce resources. It means our world in shambles. So healthcare is huge in so many ways, but there's so much more on the line beyond even that, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why I think that's important is that we're all busy, right? Like, I have a 3-year-old. We don't have like a whole lot of help with him. I work, and I have been working my butt off for Bernie and volunteering and trying to lead the effort in California for Doctors for Bernie. I want to know.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. My little boy looks at me in 20 years and says, "You knew that the planet was headed for disaster. You knew that healthcare was in a state where it bankrupts 500,000 people every year." And that's an easy figure sort of to get, right? But how many more people end up being disabled because the system wasn't there to take care of them? Many more, right? I want to tell him that I did everything I could, right, to make things right. And the thing is, Bernie is making it really easy for us to get on this train, right? Like, we have a champion who's fighting for all those things. So I emphasize all this to you guys that already know it, just to say we have to push beyond our limit, right? It's now or never. so to speak. Ways we can get involved. There's like the simple ways, right? Talk to people. Any and everybody who will listen, right? From coworkers to neighbors, and it doesn't matter. Like we live in Orange County. We have a lot of conservative neighbors, but like Bernie says all the time, we have so much more in common to fight for together. Like Republicans, or conservative folks, they hate taxes, right? Like we in California get taxed through the nose. Why is it that Amazon pays nothing in federal taxes? Like these are things that we can connect with people on and say, you know what, like Bernie's the only person talking about that. But we can only connect with people if we talk to them, right? That's right. And so talking to people is the easiest thing to do because you're already interacting with people, but beyond that, you can get involved with the Bernie campaign. It's incredibly, they make it incredibly easy for each of us to contribute in whatever capacity we're able to, right? Making calls, you can do that from home. Go canvassing, that's huge. Who in here works in healthcare? Like as a healthcare provider? That our voice as healthcare providers is incredibly powerful, right? So knocking on someone's door and saying, hey, I'm a volunteer with the Bernie Sanders campaign and Doctors for Bernie, like people do a double take. They're like, oh, okay, you're a doctor, cool. Like that carries more weight. Your voice is important. Use it to amplify Bernie's message, right? This is going to be a very close election. And there's a lot at stake, right? Phone banking, canvassing. You can also text for Bernie if you really don't like talking to people. I like to do it as a side hustle to my canvassing and phone banking, but there's lots you can do. All right, if you do work in healthcare, you do not have to be a physician. I myself am an emergency department pharmacist. Please join Doctors for Bernie because we're trying to amplify the message by bringing health providers together because as was brought up already, our voices carry more weight. If we come together, then that carries even more weight, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
And to that, I want to just add just a couple things, because you know people are busy, but this is the fight of our lives, and so what can you do in the time? In the time. So we hit that. Join Doctors for Bernie. Download the Burn app, and it has a whole sophisticated way that you can reach out to friends without giving away friends' contacts and stuff like that about the campaign. And anybody who wants to can stay afterwards. I will brief people on how to do that. It's really cool. It's sort of a unique relational organizing tool of this campaign. Canvas, you said. A couple of things about healthcare people. One, when you show up and you're clearly, and when you do it, go as a healthcare person. Put on a something that says that you wear scrubs, wear a Doctors for Bernie shirt, wear a white coat. That is very powerful for people. The other thing is realize something you do as people who provide healthcare is you have quick, very important conversations with people you don't know about really important things. You have these skills and go use them. Another thing that we really want people to do, and why it got on the list, is write an op-ed. Write some newspaper, a short thing that says, I am this person who does this thing and I support Bernie Sanders for this reason. It doesn't need to be lengthy to do that. And so we put that all on this piece of paper. And so I just want to leave you all with this, which is that the essence of the campaign, not me, us. Mm-hmm. The essence of Medicare for all. Everybody in, nobody out.
Right.
Those are powerful moral messages, and they are political messages that lead to victory.
Yep.
So take the strength of this event, and let's go do it.
Amen.